Some stories begin with a fairy tale, but this one begins with a lawsuit. It starts on the cold, unforgiving steps of the New York County Supreme Court with a young woman whose shoes were worth less than the marble they stood on. She had no lawyer, no money, and no allies, just a belief in the truth so fierce it was all she had left. By sunset, she would be headline news. This is the story of Alice Rowe, a woman who walked into a lion's den armed with nothing but her own mind and walked out with a future she could never have imagined. It's a story about how justice, in the rarest of moments, isn't blind, it's just waiting for the right person to open its eyes. The summons had felt less like paper and more like a block of concrete in Alice Rowe's hands. Dated 3 months prior, its edges were now soft and frayed from the number of times she had read it, dissected it, and used it as a coaster for cups of bitter black coffee during sleepless nights. Alice Rowe versus Innovatech Solutions, Inc. It looked like a typo, a cruel joke. Her name plain and simple next to a corporate monolith that had its own zip code and a legal department larger than her hometown's entire population. Alice lived on the 5th floor of a walk-up in a part of Brooklyn that real estate agents generously called up and coming. Her apartment was a testament to a life put on hold. Boxes of books she hadn't had time to unpack served as end tables. The only art on the wall was a framed print of her final project from university, a complex data visualization that was both beautiful and to the layperson completely incomprehensible. It was a map of her own mind, a mind that Innovatech Solutions had plundered and claimed as their own. She had been their brightest junior coder. Recruited straight out of a top-tier engineering program, she was promised mentorship, innovation, and a chance to work on their flagship project, Prometheus. For a year, she poured everything into it. Not just her time from 7 a.m. to midnight most days, but her very soul. The breakthrough came not in the sterile glass-walled office, but at 3 a.m. in her tiny apartment, fueled by cheap noodles and a flash of genuine inspiration. She developed a predictive analytics algorithm codenamed Cassandra that was light years ahead of anything on the market. It could anticipate market fluctuations with an astonishing 94% accuracy. It was her life's work condensed into 800 elegant lines of code. She presented it to her boss, Gregory Finch, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold, calculating eyes. He had praised her, called her a visionary, and promised her a promotion and a significant bonus. 2 weeks later, her keycard stopped working. An email from HR citing corporate restructuring and performance redundancies was her only severance. A month after that, Innovatech announced Prometheus 2.0 with a new revolutionary predictive engine at its core. Her engine, her Cassandra. Rage was the first emotion, a white-hot fire that consumed her. But rage doesn't pay rent. She contacted lawyers. The first 3 laughed her out of their offices. "You signed an employment agreement, Ms. Rowe," one had said, pointing to the fine print. "Everything you create on their time with their resources belongs to them." "But I created it here," she had argued, gesturing wildly around her apartment. "On my own time, on my own machine." "Can you prove it?" He'd asked, a bored look on his face. She could. She had version control logs, time-stamped commits on a private server, and digital breadcrumbs that any competent forensic analyst could follow. The problem was competent forensic analysts cost a fortune. The lawyers who believed her wanted a retainer she couldn't afford. The cheapest one quoted her $50,000 a sum as astronomical to her as the national debt. So she did the only thing she could. She filed the lawsuit herself, pro se. A lamb petitioning a pack of wolves. For months she lived in the public law library devouring books on intellectual property law, civil procedure, and courtroom etiquette. She learned about discovery motions and subpoenas. She wrote her own briefs, her fingers stained with ink, and her mind buzzing with legalese. She sold her car, her grandmother's jewelry, and her collection of rare textbooks. Every dollar went towards filing fees and printing costs. Her friends told her she was crazy. Her parents begged her to give up and come home. But giving up meant letting Gregory Finch win. It meant accepting that her mind, the only thing she truly owned, could be stolen without consequence. Now the day had come. She stood before the courthouse, a monolithic temple of justice on Center Street. People in tailored suits carrying expensive leather briefcases swept past her without a second glance. They belonged here. She was an intruder. She wore her only suit, a charcoal gray outfit she'd bought for her university graduation. It was a little too tight in the shoulders, now a result of stress-induced weight loss. Her shoes were scuffed at the toes. In her worn tote bag was her laptop and a single, perfectly organized binder, its tabs labeled Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. Inside was her entire life code repositories, email chain server logs. Her truth bound in 3 rings. Taking a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic drumming in her chest, Alice Rowe pushed open the heavy bronze doors. She was alone. She was terrified. But as she walked into the echoing marble hall, a single thought solidified in her mind, turning her fear into steel. They had taken her job, her code, and her money. They would not take her voice. Courtroom 21B was designed to intimidate. The walls were paneled in dark, solemn mahogany, and the ceilings were so high they seemed to gather shadows. The judge's bench was an elevated fortress of polished wood from which Justice Marian Albright, a woman with a reputation for her piercing intellect and complete lack of patience for frivolous arguments, presided like a hawk. Alice found her table, the one designated for the plaintiff. It felt miles away from the judge. Across the aisle, the defense table was a hive of activity. 3 lawyers from the prestigious firm of Cromwell and Sterling were arranging stacks of documents. They moved with a synchronized, effortless confidence that made Alice's stomach clench. At their head was Arthur Davies, a senior partner known for his silver tongue and merciless cross-examinations. He had hair the color of steel and eyes that seemed to assess every person he looked at for weaknesses. He glanced at Alice, a flicker of something between pity and contempt in his eyes, before turning back to his team. In the gallery behind them sat Gregory Finch. He looked relaxed, almost bored, chatting quietly with his chief technology officer. He hadn't even bothered to look in her direction. To him, she was not a person. She was a nuisance, a minor operational cost to be handled by his lawyers and then forgotten. That casual dismissal stung more than any legal threat. The clerk called the case. Docket number 784B, Rowe versus Innovatech Solutions. Alice's heart hammered against her ribs. She stood her knees, trembling slightly, and smoothed down her jacket. Alice Rowe, Your Honor, appearing pro se. Her voice was shakier than she wanted. Arthur Davies rose smoothly. Arthur Davies of Cromwell and Sterling for the defendant, Innovatech Solutions, Your Honor. His voice was a rich baritone that filled the room. The proceedings began, and Alice was immediately plunged into a world she had only read about. Davies began with a motion to dismiss his arguments, a torrent of case law and legal jargon. He painted Alice as a disgruntled former employee, a mediocre coder launching a baseless, vindictive lawsuit as a shakedown for a settlement. He argued that her evidence was circumstantial, her claims unsubstantiated, and the entire case a waste of the court's valuable time. When it was her turn, Alice took a breath and walked to the lectern. She began her opening statement, her voice gaining strength as she spoke not of legal theory, but of her work. She described the Cassandra algorithm, the passion she had poured into it the moment of its creation. She tried to explain the beauty of its logic, the intricate dance of data and prediction. Mr. Davies claims this is about money, she said, her voice clear and direct. But it isn't. It's about creation. It's about the fact that an idea, a unique string of logic born in the mind of a person, is property. It is as real as a house or a car, and Innovatech Solutions stole it. Judge Albright listened, her face impassive. Alice presented her first exhibits, the time-stamped files from her personal server showing the code's creation and evolution months before Innovatech claimed their engine was developed. Davies's cross-examination was brutal. He didn't attack her facts directly. Instead, he attacked her credibility and her expertise. Ms. Rowe, you are not a forensic data analyst, are you? No, I'm a software developer. So you have no formal training in verifying the authenticity of server logs against potential tampering. I know my own work and my own. Just a yes or no, Ms. Rowe. You have no formal training. No. And you are not a patent attorney, correct? No. You have never brought a product to market, have you? You have no experience in the commercial application of software at this scale. I was a junior developer. That was supposed to be the next step. So no experience. Thank you. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, what we have here is a junior employee who wildly overestimates the significance of a piece of student-level code, which she developed using the concepts and proprietary frameworks she was exposed to at Innovatech. He made her feel small, foolish, and naive. The jury, a panel of ordinary citizens, looked confused by the technical details and swayed by Davies's commanding presence. Alice felt like she was drowning. Unbeknownst to her, a man in the back row of the gallery was watching the proceedings with an unusual intensity. He hadn't intended to be there. Alistair Sterling, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Sterling Dynamics, was only in the courthouse to finalize a tedious zoning appeal for a new research campus his company was building upstate. His case had been postponed, and out of sheer boredom he had slipped into the back of a random courtroom to pass the time. At first he'd been ready to leave. A typical corporate dispute. But then Alice had started talking about her algorithm. She used phrases like Bayesian filtering, neural network pruning, and nonlinear data clustering. It wasn't the rambling of a disgruntled amateur. It was the precise language of a high-level architect. Alistair, who had written his first commercial code at age 16 and built his empire on a revolutionary processing chip, recognized it immediately. He saw past the cheap suit and the nervous tremor in her voice. He saw a brilliant mind at work. He listened as Davies twisted her words and belittled her accomplishments. He looked over at Gregory Finch, a man he knew by reputation. Finch was a vulture, a market consolidator who bought innovative startups and gutted them for their IP, leaving a trail of broken companies and betrayed founders. Alistair despised men like him. He watched Alice's shoulders slump as the judge called for a 15-minute recess. He saw the flicker of despair in her eyes as her dream of justice seemed to be crumbling into dust under the weight of corporate power. The army of lawyers from Cromwell and Sterling was going to bury her. And in that moment, Alistair Sterling, a man who hadn't been interested in anything but his work in over a decade, found himself utterly captivated. He felt an old forgotten spark of anger against the kind of injustice he'd fought against his entire career. He stood up. He had to talk to her. The hallway outside courtroom 21B was a sterile, impersonal space, but for Alice it felt like the loneliest place on earth. The confident click-clack of the Innovatech legal team's shoes echoed down the corridor as they headed off presumably to a catered lunch. Alice leaned against the cool marble wall, closing her eyes. The humiliation was a physical ache in her chest. Davies hadn't just questioned her case. He had questioned her entire professional worth. He had taken her life's best work and dismissed it as a student-level project. She fumbled in her bag for a bottle of water, her hands still shaking. She had one last chance after the recess to present her final evidence, but what was the point? Davies had already framed her as an unreliable narrator. She was outmatched, outmaneuvered, and utterly exhausted. He's using a classic misdirection strategy. The voice was low and calm, startling her. She opened her eyes to see a man standing a few feet away. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored dark gray suit with no tie. He wasn't handsome in a conventional movie star way. His features were too sharp, his expression too intense. But there was an arresting intelligence in his deep-set eyes. She recognized him vaguely from the back of the courtroom. "I'm sorry," Alice said, confused. "Arthur Davies." The man continued, taking a small step closer. He wasn't crowding her, but his presence had a peculiar gravity. "He's not attacking your data. He knows he can't. Your server logs are almost certainly authentic. Instead, he's attacking the presenter. He's making the jury doubt you, so they'll doubt the evidence without ever having to properly analyze it." Alice stared at him, suspicion warring with a desperate need for an ally. "Who are you?" "My name is Alistair Sterling." He said it simply as if stating the time. The name meant nothing to Alice. She didn't read the business pages or follow the tech titans. "Are you a lawyer?" she asked. A faint smile touched his lips. "No, I'm an engineer, like you." He paused, his gaze sharp and analytical. "When you were describing your algorithm, you mentioned your method for reducing overfitting in the predictive model. You used a modified dropout technique, but you applied it to the feature selection stage, not just the hidden layers. Is that correct?" The question was so specific, so deeply technical, it was like a lifeline of familiarity in a sea of confusing legal jargon. It was a question a peer would ask. No lawyer, not even her own if she had one, would have grasped that nuance. "Yes," she said, her surprise cutting through her despair. "Standard dropout is too random. It can discard critical predictor variables. I wrote a script that weights the probability of a feature being ignored based on its initial correlation with the outcome. It prunes the noise without risking the signal." Alistair nodded slowly, a look of genuine appreciation on his face. "Ingenious. You've essentially automated an intuitive process that most data scientists spend months doing by hand. That's not a student project, Ms. Rowe. That's a paradigm shift." Hearing her work described that way by a stranger who clearly understood its value was like a sip of water after days in the desert. The knot of humiliation in her stomach loosened just a little. "It doesn't matter," she said, the bitterness returning. "I can't make the judge or the jury understand that. To them it's just words." "Then show them," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Don't tell them. You have your laptop, yes?" Alice nodded. "When the court reconvenes, don't just present your final exhibit. Request permission from the judge to perform a live demonstration." "A what?" "A live demonstration. Connect your laptop to the courtroom projector. Run your Cassandra code. Then run Innovatech's Prometheus 2.0 code side by side. I saw their source code in the evidence list you submitted. It's almost identical, but they made a few clumsy modifications. They tried to mask your signature." "My signature. Every coder has a fingerprint," Alistair explained. "A unique way of structuring loops, naming variables, commenting their work. Yours is all over their code. But there's something else. When they ported it, they misunderstood a key dependency in your original library. It creates a subtle memory leak. It's a tiny flaw, but under pressure it will cause their program to lag, to consume resources inefficiently. Your original code won't." He locked eyes with her, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. "Put them both to the test right there in front of everyone. Feed them a live, complex data stream, stock market data, anything. Let the jury see one program run with the fluid elegance you designed, and the other stutter and strain under the weight of its own stolen, misunderstood architecture. Don't let Davies define your work. You define it. Make it undeniable." The idea was audacious, theatrical, and terrifying. It was also brilliant. It bypassed the jargon and presented a clear visual and irrefutable truth, but it was a massive risk. "The judge might not allow it," Alice whispered. "Ask anyway," Alistair urged. "Judge Albright has a background in patent law. She appreciates empirical evidence. Be respectful, be confident, and frame it as the only way to truly clarify the complex technical nature of your claim." The court officer called for the recess to end. People were beginning to file back into the courtroom. Alice's mind was racing. This man, this stranger, had just handed her a sword. She didn't know who he was or why he was helping her. He could be a crank or some corporate spy trying to lead her into a trap. But looking into his eyes, she saw no deception. She saw a fierce shared understanding, the respect of one builder for another. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I hate thieves," Alistair Sterling said simply. "And I admire good design." He gave her a slight nod and then turned, melting back into the crowd moving into the gallery. Alice was left standing alone once more, the echo of his words ringing in her ears. She had a choice to make. Play it safe and lose, or take a wild, desperate chance on the advice of a stranger. Taking a final shaky breath, she clutched the handle of her tote bag and walked back into the lion's den. The courtroom felt colder when Alice returned. The brief flicker of hope ignited by her conversation with Alistair Sterling was already battling the chilling reality of her situation. Arthur Davies was smirking, confident he had already won. Gregory Finch was checking his watch, his impatience palpable. "Ms. Rowe, you may present your final arguments," Judge Albright said, her tone suggesting she wished to get this over with quickly. Alice walked to the lectern, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel Alistair's presence somewhere behind her, a silent, unseen anchor. She took a breath. "Your Honor, before I present my final exhibit, I would like to make a formal request." Judge Albright raised an eyebrow. "A request?" "Yes, Your Honor. The core of this case rests on the unique functionality and architecture of a piece of software. Words have proven inadequate to convey the fundamental similarities and crucial differences between my creation and the defendant's product. I request the court's permission to perform a brief live demonstration of the two programs." A murmur went through the courtroom. Davies shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is absurd. It's courtroom theatrics. This is not a tech conference. The plaintiff is not a registered expert witness. She is trying to introduce unvetted, potentially manipulated evidence in a live setting. It is highly irregular and prejudicial." "The evidence is not unvetted, Mr. Davies." Alice countered, her voice surprisingly steady. "The source code for both programs has been submitted in discovery. I am not introducing new evidence. I am merely providing a dynamic illustration of evidence already on the record. It is the most direct and truthful way to show this court who the true author of this technology is." Judge Albright leaned forward, her expression shifting from impatience to grudging curiosity. Her background in patent law made her appreciate the difficulty of demonstrating abstract concepts. "What do you propose to demonstrate exactly, Ms. Rowe?" "I will run my algorithm Cassandra and Innovatech's Prometheus 2.0 engine side by side on two identical data partitions on my laptop. I will feed both a live high-volume stream of public financial data. I contend that my original program will process the data smoothly and efficiently, while the defendant's version, due to a critical architectural flaw introduced when they copied my work, will exhibit significant performance degradation and memory leakage. It will be a visible, measurable difference." Davies scoffed. "This is a ridiculous assertion based on nothing." "Then you should have no objection to the demonstration, Mr. Davies." Judge Albright cut in, her voice sharp. "If your client's product is superior or even functional as claimed, this demonstration will only serve to strengthen your case. If Miss Rowe's claims are as baseless as you suggest, she will only succeed in embarrassing herself. I will allow it." She looked at the clerk. "Set up the projector." Davies sat down, his face a mask of fury. Gregory Finch was no longer looking at his watch. His eyes were locked on Alice, a venomous glare replacing his earlier boredom. A court officer helped Alice connect her laptop to the large screen that descended behind the witness stand. The entire courtroom, judge, jury, and lawyers watched as her desktop appeared magnified for all to see. For a moment, she felt a paralyzing wave of self-consciousness. This was it, her last shot. She opened two terminal windows, positioning them side by side. On the left, she initiated the Cassandra script. On the right, Prometheus 2.0. She then launched a third program, a data feed that began streaming real-time trades from the New York Stock Exchange. The screen filled with cascading numbers and symbols. At first, both programs seemed to perform identically. Two columns of processed output scrolled down the screen at a rapid pace. Davies allowed himself a small, smug smile. Alice's heart sank. Had Alistair been wrong? But then, after about 90 seconds of intense data processing, a subtle change began. The scroll on the right side, the Prometheus side, started to stutter. It was almost imperceptible at first. A slight hesitation. A dropped frame. The jury probably hadn't noticed it yet, but Alice did. And she knew Alistair Sterling would too. She let it run. 2 minutes. 3. The memory leak Alistair had predicted was taking its toll. The flaw in Innovatech's stolen copy was like a ghost in their machine. The stutter on the right side became a noticeable lag. The column of numbers processed by Prometheus was now visibly falling behind Cassandra's smooth, effortless stream. Alice opened a system resource monitor, displaying it in a third window. The graph was stark and damning. Cassandra's memory usage was a flat, stable line. Prometheus's was a jagged mountain climbing steadily, consuming more and more processing power as it struggled to keep up. "As you can see, Your Honor, and members of the jury," Alice said, her voice ringing with newfound confidence, "the two programs are not the same. One is a finely tuned, efficient engine. The other is a flawed copy. They made a mistake when they took my code because they didn't understand the subtlety of its design. The inefficiency you see on the right, that is the signature of a thief. It is the ghost of their misconduct, visible for all to see." The courtroom was silent. The jury was captivated, their eyes glued to the screen, watching the undeniable visual proof of one program failing while the other excelled. Arthur Davies was pale. Gregory Finch looked as if he had been struck. He was whispering furiously to his CTO, who was shaking his head, looking horrified. Judge Albright stared at the screen for a long, silent minute. She looked from the climbing graph of Prometheus's memory usage to the serene stability of Cassandra's. She looked at the panicked faces at the defense table. And then she looked at Alice Rowe, who stood alone by the lectern, her face illuminated by the glow of her own brilliant creation. "The court will adjourn until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning," the judge announced, her voice heavy with significance. "I suggest, Mr. Davies, that you and your client use the time to seriously consider your position." She banged the gavel, the sound cracking through the tense silence like a thunderclap. It was not a victory yet, but it was a seismic shift. The ground beneath Innovatech's feet had just split wide open. The moment the judge left the bench, the courtroom erupted into a low buzz. Alice felt a dizzying rush of adrenaline and relief so potent it left her lightheaded. She shakily disconnected her laptop, her hands trembling not from fear this time but from the aftershock of her gamble. She had done it. She had made them see. Before she could even pack her bag, Arthur Davies and his team descended upon her, their professional composure shattered and replaced by a thinly veiled panic. "Ms. Rowe," Davies began, his voice a low, urgent hiss, "my client is prepared to offer you a settlement, to put this whole unfortunate matter behind us." One of his junior associates held out a tablet with a document on it. $500,000, Davies said. "And, of course, a non-disclosure agreement. You walk away and this all goes away." A week ago, that sum would have seemed like a king's ransom. It would have solved all her problems, paid off her debts, and given her a fresh start. But it wasn't a week ago. Something had changed in her. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the truth. "No," Alice said, her voice quiet but firm. Davies blinked, taken aback. "I may be able to go to $750, but that is the absolute final offer. Take it, Ms. Rowe. If you refuse, we will appeal. We will bury you in litigation for the next decade. You will be old and gray before you see a penny, and we will countersue you for trade secret theft and defamation until you have nothing left." The threat was naked, vicious. "My answer is no," she repeated, looking him straight in the eye. Before Davies could retort, a calm voice cut through the tension. "I believe the lady has given you her answer, Arthur." Alistair Sterling had materialized beside Alice. He moved with a quiet authority that made the three lawyers from Cromwell and Sterling take an involuntary step back. Davies's eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Sterling, I wasn't aware you had an interest in this case." The deference in his tone was immediate and absolute. Alistair Sterling wasn't just another wealthy man. He was a titan, a pillar of the tech world whose company Sterling Dynamics could buy and sell Innovatech before breakfast. "My interests are my own," Alistair said coolly. He turned his attention to Alice, ignoring the lawyers as if they were furniture. "Ms. Rowe, may I have a word with you, in private?" He gently guided her away from the stunned legal team and out into the now empty hallway. He led her to a quiet alcove far from any prying ears. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "That was one of the most brilliant pieces of legal strategy I have ever witnessed." "It was your strategy," Alice corrected him, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you." "I only pointed the way. You took the steps," he replied. "Which brings me to what happens next. They will come back with a higher offer. They'll probably offer you a few million tomorrow morning to make this disappear, but a settlement and an NDA means they still win in a way. They pay a pittance, admit no wrongdoing, and bury your technology forever, so it never competes with them. You get money, but you lose your creation." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "I have a different offer for you." He wasn't just a casual observer. Alistair's rivalry with Gregory Finch was well known in the industry's inner circles. Finch built his company by acquiring and absorbing innovators. Alistair built his by out-innovating everyone. They were philosophical opposites, and their competition was fierce. "I saw what Finch did to a small AI startup called Viridian 3 years ago," Alistair explained. "He acquired them, stole their lead engineers for a different project, and then shuttered the company, shelving their core product because it threatened one of Innovatech's legacy systems. Finch doesn't create, he consumes. I want to see him beaten, not just bought off." He leaned against the wall, his posture relaxed, but his words carrying immense weight. "Here is my proposal. Refuse any settlement. Let's go for a full judgment. I will provide you with legal representation. Not just any lawyers, but my personal counsel from Whitman, Shaw, and Garrett. They are the best IP litigators in the world. They will formally take over your case tomorrow morning. We will not only win, we will set a precedent. We will countersue for punitive damages, for theft of trade secrets, and for malicious prosecution." Alice was speechless. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. "What do you get out of it?" she asked, her voice cautious. This was the real world. Men like Alistair Sterling didn't operate out of pure altruism. "I'm glad you asked," he said, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "I am an investor, Ms. Rowe. I invest in talent and in disruptive technology. Your Cassandra algorithm is not just clever, it's revolutionary. It has applications in finance, logistics, medical diagnostics, dozens of fields. It's worth billions, not millions. When we win the case and you regain full and undisputed control of your intellectual property, my venture capital firm Sterling Ventures gets the first right of refusal for seed funding. We will give you the capital to build your own company with you as CEO and majority shareholder. We will provide you with lab space, resources staff, everything you need to turn Cassandra into a global force. I don't want to buy your algorithm, Ms. Rowe. I want to invest in its founder." The scope of his offer was staggering. He wasn't offering her a safety net. He was offering her an empire. He wasn't saving a damsel in distress. He was making a strategic investment in a mind he believed in. He was giving her the power she had been denied the chance to build, not just to win. It was an alliance, not a rescue. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of a catch of a hidden agenda. She saw only a focused, determined businessman who saw an opportunity to defeat a rival, to champion a cause he believed in, and to make a fortune in the process. It was a calculated alliance of iron and gold. For months she had fought just to survive, to be heard. Now she was being offered the chance to roar. "You'll have the best lawyers in the world in your corner by morning," he said softly. "You won't be alone in there again." Alice thought of the condescending smirks of the Innovatech lawyers, of Gregory Finch's dismissive glare. She thought of her tiny apartment, her mountain of debt, and the burning, relentless belief in her own work. Alistair Sterling wasn't just offering her a way out. He was offering her a way up. "Okay," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Let's do it." A slow, genuine smile spread across Alistair's face. "Excellent. I'll make the call. Get some rest, Ms. Rowe. Tomorrow we go on the offensive." When court resumed the next morning, the atmosphere was entirely different. Alice Rowe did not walk to the plaintiff's table alone. She was flanked by two individuals who moved with the predatory grace of sharks. One was Eleanor Vance, a legendary litigator in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that could dissect a lie from 100 paces. The other was a sharp young man named Ben Carter, who carried a briefcase that likely cost more than Alice's rent for a year. They were from Whitman, Shaw, and Garrett. They were Alistair Sterling's personal legal guard dogs. Eleanor Vance addressed the court. Your Honor, Eleanor Vance appearing as lead counsel for the plaintiff, Ms. Alice Rowe, who will now serve as our primary expert witness. The color drained from Arthur Davies' face. He knew who Vance was. Everyone in corporate law knew. She was the lawyer you called when you didn't just want to win. You wanted to scorch the earth where your enemy stood. The game had changed, and Davies knew with a sinking feeling that he was no longer playing. He was being played. What followed was not a court case. It was a systematic dismantling. Eleanor Vance did not just present evidence. She wove a narrative of corporate greed and predatory behavior. She began by calling Innovatech's chief technology officer, the same man who had been whispering frantically with Finch during the demonstration back to the stand. With surgical precision, Vance walked him through the source code of Prometheus 2.0. She didn't ask his opinion. She stated facts and forced him to confirm them. Is it not true, Mr. Henderson, that the variable naming convention in this section of code alpha node beta weight gamma decay is identical to the convention used in Ms. Rowe's original source code, which you claim your team never saw? It's a common convention, Henderson stammered. Is it common for it to be used in conjunction with a commenting style that uses a double / followed by a 4-digit date code, which by a remarkable coincidence is also Ms. Rowe's unique signature and appears nowhere else in Innovatech's entire codebase? Yes or no? No. Vance moved on to the memory leak. Yesterday we witnessed a significant performance degradation in your product. Were you aware of this flaw prior to the demonstration? We are constantly working to optimize. Were you aware of this specific flaw, Mr. Henderson? Vance's voice was like ice. There were some performance flags in beta testing. So you knew the product you launched was defective. It went on like this for an hour. Vance cornered him, trapped him, and left his credibility in tatters. By the time he stepped down, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years. But Vance was just getting started. Alistair's resources had been deployed overnight. His forensic accounting team had been digging into Innovatech. His corporate intelligence unit had been quietly reaching out to former employees. Just before lunch, they had their breakthrough. The plaintiff calls a rebuttal witness, Eleanor Vance announced. Mr. David Chen. A nervous-looking man in his late 20s walked to the stand. He was a former junior developer at Innovatech, one of Alice's former colleagues. Alistair's team had discovered he'd been fired 3 months after Alice for raising ethical concerns with HR. With the full legal protection offered by Alistair's firm, he was now ready to talk. Vance had him authenticate a series of emails. The courtroom projector once again lit up, but this time it displayed an email chain between Gregory Finch and the head of R&D. The first email was from Finch, dated the day after Alice had presented Cassandra to him. It read, "The Rowe algorithm is the key. Her employment agreement gives us full ownership. Have Henderson's team reverse engineer it and integrate it into Prometheus immediately. Rebrand it, file the patents, and begin the termination process for Rowe. Keep it clean." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. It was a smoking gun. A confession in writing. Arthur Davies leaped to his feet shouting objections, but it was too late. The damage was done. The final email in the chain was even more damning. It was from the head of R&D to Finch. "There are some structural complexities. The girl's design is unconventional. We can replicate the function, but there are stability issues. It might be better to keep her on to supervise the integration." Finch's reply was a single chilling line, "Absolutely not. She knows what she built. She's a liability. Get it done and get her out. Manage the flaw in post-launch patches." The jury stared at Gregory Finch, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. Finch for the first time looked truly terrified. He was no longer a powerful CEO. He was just a common thief exposed in a court of law. Judge Albright's face was like stone. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I will be referring this evidence to the district attorney's office for investigation into potential perjury, wire fraud, and conspiracy." The final judgment was swift and brutal. The court ruled entirely in Alice Rowe's favor. She was awarded full ownership and all rights to the Cassandra algorithm. Innovatech was ordered to cease and desist from using any part of her code immediately. The judge awarded her $10 million in compensatory damages for lost income and career damage. Then, citing the malicious, willful, and predatory nature of Innovatech's actions, she added another $50 million in punitive damages. The gavel came down. It was over. A wave of pure, unadulterated vindication washed over Alice. It was so powerful she had to grip the table to keep from collapsing. She looked over at Eleanor Vance, who gave her a rare, small smile. She looked into the gallery and met Alistair Sterling's gaze. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod. It was a look of profound respect. She had won. She had not just been heard. She had been believed. The truth which had felt so small and fragile for so long had finally proven to be a sword. The aftermath of the verdict was chaos. As soon as the courtroom doors opened, a swarm of reporters and news cameras flooded the hallway. The story had leaked. A lone, self-representing woman bringing a tech giant to its knees was a modern-day David and Goliath tale. They surged forward, microphones and cameras thrust in Alice's face. "Ms. Rowe, how does it feel? What will you do with the money? Are you the next big name in tech?" The questions were a bewildering cacophony. The flashing lights were disorienting. Alice, who had just faced down a phalanx of corporate lawyers, felt a fresh wave of panic. This was a new kind of battleground, one she was completely unprepared for. Suddenly, a cordon of quiet professional men in dark suits formed around her. They moved with an unobtrusive efficiency, creating a calm space in the middle of the storm. A moment later, Alistair Sterling was by her side. "Let's get you out of here," he said, his voice a calm anchor in the noise. He placed a light guiding hand on her back, shielding her from the worst of the press scrum. Eleanor Vance and her team ran interference with Vance, crisply stating, "My client will be making no comment at this time." They moved as a unit through the throng of reporters, out of the courthouse, and onto the sun-drenched marble steps where Alice's journey had begun that first lonely morning. The world looked different now. Sharper. Brighter. A sleek, impossibly black Bentley limousine was idling at the curb, its tinted windows gleaming. A driver in a crisp uniform held the door open. The contrast was not lost on Alice. She had arrived on the subway wearing scuffed shoes and a suit she couldn't really afford. Now this. "The car is waiting," Alistair said, holding the door for her. There was no triumphant flourish, no gloating. His tone was practical, forward-looking. "I've taken the liberty of scheduling a meeting for 11 tomorrow, the first board meeting of what comes next." Alice paused before getting in, looking at him. "Board meeting? Of course," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You're the founder and CEO. I'm your first investor and board member. We have a company to build. We need to discuss server architecture for scaling Cassandra, a recruitment strategy for hiring a core engineering team, and a roadmap for the first 3 product verticals. We should probably hire a CFO before lunch." She looked from his intense, focused face to the waiting limousine. This was not the end of a story. It was the explosive beginning of a new one. The legal battle was just the prelude. The real work, the work of building, of creating, of changing the world with her ideas, was just starting. She slid into the cool leather interior of the car. It was silent inside, the chaos of the street instantly muted. The interior smelled of success. Alistair got in opposite her, and the door closed with a soft, satisfying thud. As the limousine pulled away from the curb, leaving the courthouse, and the flashing cameras behind Alice looked out the window, she saw her reflection superimposed over the blur of the city. She saw a woman who was no longer alone. no longer afraid. She had walked into that building with nothing but the contents of her own mind. She was leaving with the resources to turn those contents into a legacy. Alistair was already tapping away on a tablet, pulling up financial models and network diagrams. "I've been running some simulations," he said, his eyes alight with the same passion she felt when she was coding. "If we apply Cassandra to high-frequency commodities trading, the potential ROI is staggering. But I think the real value is in medical diagnostics. Imagine feeding it genetic markers and patient histories to predict disease onset." Alice listened, her own mind beginning to race to build on his ideas to see the future taking shape. The conversation wasn't romantic. It was something deeper, more exciting. It was a meeting of minds, a partnership forged in a crucible of injustice and sealed with mutual respect and boundless ambition. The limousine accelerated smoothly, merging into the endless river of New York City traffic. It was heading downtown towards the gleaming towers of the financial district, towards the future. Alice Rowe had arrived at court alone, a plaintiff with an impossible case. She left in a billionaire's limousine, a CEO, on her way to her first board meeting. The Bentley moved through the city's arteries with an unnerving smoothness, insulating its passengers from the chaotic symphony of horn sirens and rumbling subways that had been the soundtrack to Alice's life. They didn't head for the glass canyons of Wall Street, but for a newer, sleeker part of the city where technology and architecture merged into gleaming spires. The limousine pulled into a private underground entrance, and the world outside vanished. They ascended in a private elevator, a silent, brushed steel capsule that shot upwards with breathtaking speed. There were no buttons, only a biometric scanner that had lit up at Alistair's touch. For the 80 floors, neither of them spoke. Alice caught her reflection in the polished steel walls. The same charcoal suit, the same tired face, but the eyes were different. The fear was gone, replaced by a bewildering mix of exhaustion and a fierce, nascent energy. The woman in the reflection was a stranger she was just getting to know. The doors opened not into a lavish penthouse office, but into a space that felt more like a futuristic laboratory. It was a vast circular room at the apex of the building, encased in floor-to-ceiling smart glass that currently offered a staggering 360-degree panorama of New York City. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The room was minimalist, a central work table that looked like a solid block of obsidian, a few discreetly humming server racks against one wall, and what appeared to be a whiteboard that spanned an entire curved section of the room. "My workshop," Alistair said, gesturing to the space. "Fewer distractions up here." He walked to the massive whiteboard, which flickered to life at his approach, revealing itself to be a high-resolution interactive screen. With a few gestures, he pulled up a complex flowchart. At the center was a box labeled Cassandra. "Right." He began all business. "The path of least resistance and fastest monetization is high-frequency trading. We can build a proprietary platform, license it to a handful of investment banks for 9 figures a year, and be profitable within 6 months. The market is hungry for even a 0.5% edge. You're offering them a 5% edge. They'll trample each other to get it." He began mapping it out, his fingers flying across the screen, creating new boxes and connecting them with lines of light. It was a brilliant, ruthlessly efficient plan. And it made Alice's stomach turn. She thought of the beauty of her code, the elegant logic she had spent years perfecting. To see its first and primary application be a tool to make the unimaginably rich even richer felt like a betrayal of its potential. It felt like a surrender. "No," she said. Alistair stopped, turning from the screen to face her. He wasn't annoyed, merely curious. He raised an eyebrow, inviting a challenge. "No. That can be a revenue stream," Alice clarified, stepping forward into the light of the screen. "An important one, but it can't be our mission. It can't be the first thing we do." "It's the most logical first step," he countered, though his tone was analytical, not dismissive. "It provides the capital base to fund everything else." "We already have a capital base," she said, gesturing to him. You are the capital base. We have the luxury of not having to chase the lowest hanging fruit. We can afford to make a statement. She looked from the flowchart on the screen to the sprawling city below them, a living organism of millions of people. In the car, you mentioned medical diagnostics, predicting disease. Let's start there. Her voice grew stronger, filled with the passion that had been stifled for so long. Let's feed Cassandra medical journals, patient data, genetic markers. Let's build a tool for doctors, not for traders. Let's start by building something that saves lives. That will be our legacy. That will attract the brightest, most passionate engineers in the world. People will fight to work for a company like that. The money will follow, but it won't be the reason we exist. She stood her ground, her heart pounding, half expecting him to dismiss her as a naive idealist. This was his world, his money, his tower. She was a guest here, a junior partner at best. Alistair looked at her for a long, silent moment. He studied her face, then glanced at the city beyond the glass as if seeing it through her eyes. He saw not a grid of assets and liabilities, but a landscape of human potential and frailty. He turned back to the screen. With a single decisive swipe of his hand, he erased the entire high-frequency trading flowchart. The screen went blank. Then with his finger he wrote 2 words at the very top: Project Nightingale. "All right, CEO Rowe." Alistair Sterling said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He tossed her a light pen from the workstation. "You're the architect. Show me the blueprint." And so Alice Rowe's journey didn't end on the courthouse steps, it began there. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that the most valuable assets we possess are not in our bank accounts, but in our minds. It's a testament to the fact that integrity and intellect can be the most formidable weapons against even the most entrenched power. What happens when brilliance refuses to be silenced? What happens when one person's belief in themselves is finally matched by another's belief in them? You get a revolution. If this story of resilience, justice, and unexpected alliances resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that prove truth is often more dramatic than fiction. Click that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Thank you for listening.